And welcome to Talk Story, Maui's longest-running talk show. I'm your host, Cindy Paulos. Been doing this show for about 30 years, and I always have special favorite people I love talking to. And today, I'm honored to have in the studio one of them. Barry Nickelsberg came in last year, and he's the Chief Development Officer for the Carter Center, and he's got 42 years of experience in fundraising. I mean, this number might impress you. He's raised in excess of $1 billion. And he has taught and worked with the Carter Center for so many years. And the Carter Center is an amazing place that I don't think he ever gets tired of talking about. And there's genuine love that you will hear in his voice for what he does. He's a man with a mission. And the mission of the Carter Center is in partnership with Emory University. We'll be talking about that. It's an interesting marriage. And it's guided by a fundamental commitment to human rights and the alleviation of human suffering. And it seeks to prevent and resolve conflicts, enhance freedom and democracy, and improve health. It does that so well. And I also like the fact that it's working so hard for peace in the world. That's one of my passions, of course. And it's really just quite an amazing place. So welcome, Barry. It's so good to have you here again.
Well, I'm delighted to be back. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm honored. And in fact, I'm going to go Facebook Live if anyone wants to see you talking here. You can go to Cindy Paulos and see the Facebook Live. So
much for having a face built for radio.
I'm the same way. So it's you know what? It's the mission is the message, and the message is the mission. And you have a mission and a message that is so valuable to share. How did you first get involved in working with the Carter Center?
They needed someone who had experience with bilateral organizations and multilateral, bilateral country to country, multilateral being the United Nations. And I had all of that, and I'd had 30 plus years of experience in the not-for-profit sector, and I was pretty comfortable in almost any aspect of fundraising. And so I was given this opportunity. It's a wonderful way to cap a career.
What was your first impression when you met President Carter?
I was scared to death and in awe, because I really do believe he's a living legend, and most of us don't get to meet people like that.
That's so true. That's so true.
And he's so humble and always has been. And so he was totally nonplussed, it was just hi. And he made me feel very comfortable almost immediately.
Did you meet him at the Carter Center?
I did, yes. 2 weeks after I started, I turned to our chief of staff and I said, I've never met the man. And he said, oh, we'll fix that right now. And with that, we walked out of his office, and the president just happened to be walking down the hall. And
that must have been amazing. I was asking before we went on the air where its library is, and I was really, really amazed to hear that the library is right there across the walkway. The library is right at the same location, right?
It is, yes. We have 38 acres altogether. The library and museum, that's one facility, and that's a federal, that's run through the National Archives. But the Carter Center, of course, is a private not-for-profit organization. And the two facilities are connected by actually a lobby, and it works out very well.
Well, that's really quite an honor to be able to be at that place. You told me a little story. I said, well, why did they pick that particular location? And I don't even know the year it began, but what was the story of the location being built there?
William Tecumseh Sherman marched to the sea to pretty much end the war between the states, as I'm told it's called in the South. To end the Civil War, Sherman's march to the sea. One thing was to burn Atlanta to the ground, to just decimate it. And it was intended to break the will of the people, and it did just that. He needed a place to see what was going on, to have a full panoramic view. Where the Carter Center now sits was his location, because it sits up on a hill with an unobstructed view of Atlanta. So as Atlanta burned, he sat in his tent and watched that horror unfold before him. So nobody really wanted to use that property. It was the devil's land. And when President Carter left the White House, he was given an opportunity to create a library, and he did much more than that, but he looked around Atlanta, and someone said, well, there's this 38 acres. And he said, it's a beautiful site. It's a beautiful piece of property, and we'll change it from a place where its history was all about war to a place where its current day is all about peace.
Wow. That's a beautiful story, and there's so much you've done. We were literally just talking very recently before the show began about what your efforts have been towards peace. And you really have to get in the thick of it. I mean, and it's such an easy word to say and such a challenging thing to try to actually make happen. And you were I saw a YouTube video of you in Israel just recently talking to some of the people there. And a lot of it is being there talking, right?
We don't believe in fighting, so the option is talking.
Mm-hmm.
And I had an opportunity to meet with many Israeli officials, many Palestinian officials, and learned a great deal. I actually thought that if they had a common enemy, they would come together. I was apparently wrong, because ISIS was the common enemy.
Right.
But they didn't come together. They just kept at each other, which is terrible.
There's such a long history. I mean, almost you even think of in the DNA of what's gone on for so long there, Well, and you have to keep talking and you have to keep trying, but it's hard to break down those barriers.
Well, think what happened between Egypt and Israel in 1978 and 1979.
Yeah.
The peace accord signed at Camp David was brokered entirely by President Carter.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only peace treaty ever signed in the Middle East. And it's still in effect today. We're here 40 years later talking about it, and it's as solid today as it was the day it was signed.
When you go there to those places, do you try to start with that as a basis and remind them that this has worked and this is still in effect, and can we go from there?
I didn't really meet anyone who didn't know about it.
Really? Interesting. A lot of people in America don't remember and don't know.
Yes, but the Israelis and the Egyptians are living under it.
Mm-hmm.
And a generation plus has now lived in safety because of that. Israelis and Egyptians have not been at war for 40 years. Thank you, President Carter.
Yeah.
His greatest desire is to bring that same sense of peace and security to the entire Middle East. It's a little hard to do when people say, well, Israel shouldn't exist. When you have that kind of mindset, it's hard to come to the table and have a reasonable conversation. We have staff who are the world's leading experts in conflict resolution, and they're working with the Israelis, with the Palestinians, they're working with the Syrians, trying to bring that horror to an end. And we keep it up because if you quit, there is no hope for it.
It's funny, my next CD I'm working on is called Hope. And when you see the status of the world today, I mean, I think a lot of people are praying for hope and need hope more than ever. But then again, that's why I like talking to people like you, because there's a lot of work being done by people that you don't hear about in the news. You don't know the work of people like Jimmy Carter, a lot of the things that he does. We don't know about what you're doing. We don't know a lot about the people who really are working for goodwill and peace in the world, because a lot of that is done behind closed doors or done silently to get effective work done.
Absolutely.
So here you are. You have an interesting position. You're working as a person to help raise funds to help stop war, to help stop disease, and a lot's being done, but a lot of people are not aware of it. I know in the health field, Jimmy Carter, I don't know how he came about this, but I'd be interested in hearing how Jimmy Carter came about trying to work to stop some of the terrible diseases, some of which in America we've never even heard of.
Yeah, no, I don't think any of these diseases has been in the United States since the early 1920s. But President Carter, when he created the Carter Center, I'll back up just a little bit. When he left the White House and created the Carter Center, he created it as a center for conflict resolution to continue the conversations that started between the Israelis and the Egyptians. And he thought, if we could have those conversations between any two peoples, countries who are at odds, maybe we could reduce the chance of combat. And so the Carter Center was born. We worked very closely to negotiate a peace treaty between the government of Colombia and the FARC rebels. It ended a 52-year war.
I didn't know about that.
And, well, we did. And we don't pat ourselves on the back, and we don't advertise it. And it's intentional not to advertise it. What we give all credit to whoever is local on the ground. So the Colombians and the FARC rebels received the credit that, in fact, they were due. It wasn't the Carter Center coming in and pounding its chest and saying, oh, look at me. It was our working behind the scenes to bring them to the table, to find a resolution that worked for them. And the Carter Center is trusted. And so when that conflict came to an end, part of the agreement was that the rebels would give up their weapons. And they said, well, we'll give them to the Carter Center because we don't trust anybody else.
Oh, whoa.
And so we were responsible for collecting and destroying all those weapons. And we did it in full public view, and there's complete transparency. And that's what's expected of the Carter Center. When we go to monitor elections around the world, in places like Nigeria and Kenya and Tunisia and all over the world except the United States, and we could talk about that.
We could go there.
But
yeah.
We're respected. You know, the United Nations and the European Union and the Carter Center are really the triumvirate that makes sure that elections are free and fair. And unless we run into a situation as we did in Zimbabwe, where President Mugabe wanted to win and he didn't want anybody observing 2 weeks before the election, we were thrown out of the country.
Really?
And I figure if he threw us out, it's because he could not manage us. He couldn't bribe us. He couldn't, I was glad. It said a lot about the respectability and the honesty of the Carter Center, quite frankly.
Going back to what you said about when you do some of this work, you don't do it for your own name's sake. And in fact, I think it probably is very important and sometimes makes the difference if these people themselves that are there in Colombia or wherever you are, where you make a deal, can take the credit, because for their purposes, that could be a major reason to do some of these things rather than the Carter Center, or, rather than the people working for the Carter Center. You're then really allowing them to take the credit where you're not recognized at all. And of course, in this day and age, we're not kind of used to that. We're used to people in charge wanting to say they did everything themselves. So it's a different day and age. So what is, the philosophy and what is the feeling at the Carter Center when you see some of the things you're working for the United Nations and for peace and for really working behind the scenes for the good of all, when you see that work being kind of hindered or maybe even going backwards because some of the things that are being done today?
Patience is a virtue, and we never lose track of our goal. We have a goal, and we stay on course as best we possibly can to achieve that goal. One of the diseases that we have been working to eradicate is called guinea worm disease.
And I would guess that a lot of people listening do not know, and I have to say, We've talked about it before, but for the life of me, I don't even remember what guinea worm disease is.
Well, it's a nightmare, actually. It's a parasite that lives in water. If you drink the water, you ingest the parasite.
Ouch. Yeah.
It then grows to 3 feet in length over a 12-month period. It then forms a blister on your body anywhere it wants. You can use your imagination, but there is nothing off limits. And then up to a 2-month period of time, it crawls out of your body. If you try and pull it out and it breaks, it crawls back in, grows to 3 feet in length again, and the whole process continues. And so people have, for centuries, for millennia, this goes back to the Old Testament, it's called the fiery serpent. Mm. And in 1986, there were 3.5 million cases of that worldwide.
Where was it mainly based in?
Africa.
Africa. Hmm.
And as of December 31st, 2018, there were 28 cases left on the face of the earth.
That's miraculous.
And we're very happy about that. But when someone from a UN agency was on air claiming credit for the eradication of guinea worm, and we happened to know there was that agency really had nothing to do with it. They were just claiming credit off the top of their heads, I guess. Mm-hmm. We did nothing to correct that impression, or that misimpression that was given to the population, to Americans and elsewhere, because the goal is to eradicate the disease. The goal is not self-aggrandizement, so it doesn't really matter to President Carter who takes credit for what. One quick story, when he was still in the White House, the last 444 days, there were 52 Americans held captive in Tehran. And it was President Carter and his Secretary of State, Warren Christopher, who negotiated the release of those hostages. But Ayatollah Khomeini hated Jimmy Carter because Carter wouldn't give the Shah back to him because he wanted to kill the Shah. And Carter said, I just cannot send someone to his death knowingly. I just can't do that. You want to try him, it's fine. But if you want to just kill him, I can't do that. So the Ayatollah decided, fine, I'll get you back for this. And what he said was, you can have the hostages back the moment Ronald Reagan raises his hand and swears to uphold the Constitution. And that's exactly what happened. They were loaded on a plane, and they were given the go-ahead the moment that Reagan was named President of the United States, when he took the oath of office. Well, many people in America said, my gosh, this guy is incredible. He hasn't been in office an hour yet, and he's been able to do what Jimmy Carter couldn't do in 444 days.
Amazing.
And Mr. Reagan never corrected that misimpression, but neither did President Carter. And so I had the opportunity once to ask him, why didn't you? All right, it's one thing Reagan doesn't, but why didn't you? And he looked at me, he said, Barry, what was the goal? And I said, well, to release the hostages, get them out safely. He said, and we achieved that goal. Yes. That's it. The goal was never to claim credit, to pat ourselves on the back, to feel good. And so if someone else, he's the same man today. Mm-hmm. So if somebody else wants to take credit for something the Carter Center has done, he'd, keep your eye on the goal.
Exactly. And that's what people like. I was mentioning to you because I'm involved in doing spoken word and music and the Grammys. And Jimmy Carter just won a Grammy for a spoken word release.
Yes,
and
his book, Faith.
Yes. And you mentioned, and I'd forgotten about that, he had actually won other Grammys before, too. We don't think
this was his third
Grammy. And he didn't show up. But how old is he now?
He's 94.
He's 94, and he's still out there doing work, isn't he?
Absolutely. He's as alert, sharp, focused, committed today as he ever was.
With his wonderful wife, Rosalind.
Yes, well, she's 91, and she is just as alert and focused today. They are a remarkable couple. They've been married 71 years.
There were a lot of people thought that he wouldn't be able to survive. He was diagnosed with cancer.
Yes.
And that in itself was almost miraculous.
Yes.
It didn't stop him. It's true that he teach Sunday school?
He does, in his hometown of Plains, Georgia, Maranatha Baptist Church. He actually helped create that church because during his presidency, an African-American man came to the door of the church that Carter had been baptized in and taught at, First Baptist Church of Plains. And people there told this man that there were many fine black churches in the area, and he would be more comfortable in one of them. Now, the man wasn't even asking for membership, which shouldn't have been an issue. He just wanted to sit and listen to the service on a Sunday morning, and they wouldn't let him in. And Carter said, in that case, you're not letting me in either. And so he and some friends in the community started their own church.
Wow.
Because he simply would not be part of something that segregated people. He just didn't believe in it. And so, yes, he teaches. He teaches two Sundays a month.
To me, that's amazing that he does that. And a lot of people, like you say, are still not aware of everything that is being involved with what his purpose and goal is. And the machine that will carry on even after his passing is already in place. You understand that, and you've seen it. And how many people are working at the Carter Center right now to try to fulfill those goals?
We have 225 people on staff in Atlanta.
Wow.
And a lot of us travel a great deal because if you're involved in conflict resolution, you need to be on site where there is conflict to be resolved. And if you're trying to eradicate guinea worm, you can't do it from afar. You have to be on the ground there, just as we have 4 other diseases that I would imagine most people in America have never heard of before. But we are making great strides with them. And I do want to mention that, so there's a disease called trachoma.
And I don't know about that either.
And it's carried by flies that are attracted to human eyes. And we have photographs of young people in Africa, and it looks from a distance that they're wearing horn-rimmed glasses, and the camera gets closer and closer and closer, and suddenly you realize those are flies around the eyes.
Wow. Ouch.
And they carry a bacteria, and they, when you are infected with this disease, over time, your eyelids will invert, and when you blink your eyes, you scratch your cornea and go blind. Now, it can be corrected in several different ways. One of them is with azithromycin. We know it here as Zithromax or Z-Pak, a simple antibiotic. It's a 5-day course. What we discovered was that if you give everyone in a community Zithromax every 6 months for 3 years, you have eliminated the bacteria that causes trachoma from that community. The bacteria simply no longer exists, flies or otherwise. But what we didn't know, and what we are thrilled about, is that it has, by having this mass drug administration, we've reduced the infant mortality in those communities by as much as 18%.
Wow.
And that's
huge.
It is huge. That 18%. So what we've done in places, I'll just pick Ethiopia as an example. There's no more guinea worm there. River blindness is well on its way out. Trachoma is well on its way out. We started building latrines to help the fly population die down. And we were there on our first day of building, and some women asked if we could build more. And when we asked why, they explained that in their culture they can't urinate or defecate during daylight hours as a man might see them. And these women were dying of UTIs and bowel obstructions. And suddenly they're not. We build 100,000 latrines every month. And President Carter jokingly refers to himself as the potty man of Ethiopia. it has changed. The Carter Center, I know, has changed the lives of millions of people in Africa and Latin America and in Asia. We work around the world. We've had programs in 71 countries.
Well, as we've been talking almost a half an hour, we should probably mention your website, and if people do want to help, how they can find out more and help.
They can certainly find out cartercenter.org. If anyone would like to learn more about what we do, the other thing I'd like to mention is we have internship program.
Oh, really?
And for those who are college juniors, seniors, or graduate students, they can apply to come to be with us and work in conflict resolution or election monitoring or
really?
Guinea worm eradication or any of the programs. We take about 40 interns a year. A semester. So they could be with us for 16 weeks during the school year.
And then you'd send them out to these places
Sometimes
with someone?
they go out or they stay in Atlanta working on various projects.
Uh-huh.
And we had an intern not too many years ago who came to us with an idea about identifying the warring factions in Syria. And he was able to, in real time, show who was where at any given moment. And we did not release that, of course, because that would have been horrific. But when the Russians said, oh, no, we've not bombed anybody in this area, we're only going after ISIS, we were able to show them in black and white, really, this is what you did, this is when you did it, this was the result. That intern is now a full-time employee of the Carter Center.
No.
And it's a very important program for us. And it's really helping us to figure out who the players are at any given moment that we might be able to broker something of a peace accord.
So, in a way, I'm almost sensing that you're working as what would be done in the State Department and working in that field without being part of that form of political government. So you have the freedom of sorts to be able to do your work, but you don't necessarily have the funding or the security that you would get if you were really part of the government. Is that correct?
By not being part of the government, by being a private, not-for-profit organization, known overseas as an NGO, non-governmental organization, we have far greater access and, quite frankly, credibility with the people with whom we're trying to work. They trust us.
But
we don't have a political agenda.
I have to ask the question, wouldn't the CIA sometimes and the Pentagon, you're just referring to what you just were saying, wouldn't they be interested in some of the things you're doing because you're able to get some of this information and function in ways that you just mentioned about saying you have proof that Russia was lying in those situations?
Would they be interested? I imagine they might, but we don't share our information.
Oh, you don't?
No.
That's
It's
interesting.
all
That's surprising to me. Yeah.
No, we don't share it with the United Nations, let alone the CIA.
You don't?
No, we don't do anything like that.
So you have your own umbrella organization that you can do it. Let's talk about funding. There are people doing, obviously the Gates Foundation has cared a lot about the health situation in Africa and around the world. They've been one of their major focus, I believe, is malaria, correct?
Yes,
that's
correct.
Are you ever able to work with other organizations who are caring and knowing what you're doing? Will they help you, the ones that have more money than you, will they help funding some of these projects that are very expensive?
Well, we partner with organizations all the time, especially as a way to confirm what our results are. So we do partner with the World Health Organization. They will come into a country after we say it is free of this disease, whatever that is, and they'll spend whatever amount of time they need to confirm that, yes, that disease is no longer in this country. And that's a way that we partner. We partner with all kinds of places.
But will they fund you if you need their help in situations?
We receive, here's the breakdown. We receive in excess of $200 million a year in medication from either Pfizer and or Merck. They make different meds, and those medications we distribute. They don't. So they give us the medication, and we distribute it around the world. A couple of years ago, we recognized that we had distributed our 500 millionth dose of medication.
Wow.
And this is pretty normal for us, quite frankly. So then there's $100 million a year that's needed in cash for a variety of reasons. And we raise $100 million. The development team at the Carter Center is second to none in the world. I put them up against anybody.
You're doing a lot of that time just traveling around and talking to people through the Rotary Club and other places and really trying to explain what your purpose and what you're accomplishing, right?
Just like this.
Yeah.
But I never ask for money. I just don't.
Really?
No. What I'll tell people, I'll tell them all about the Carter Center. If they're interested, go to cartercenter.org and decide for yourself what you would like to do. And some people send us $5 a year, and some people send us $5 million a year. And quite frankly, we need every one of them.
Uh-huh.
And so we have a lot of folks who are part of this effort, this success, quite frankly. We could never have done what we've done with any of these diseases or conflict resolution without our partners. And those partners are primarily Americans, but we also get some money from the governments. Sometimes it's Sweden, sometimes Ireland, Germany, France. They've all seen the value of what we're able to do, and so they've supported it. I can't say we don't get any U.S. federal dollars, but if we do, they're extremely limited.
Huh.
And so from corporations, foundations, individuals, we raise $100 million a year.
How do you sit down and after you find one thing, one goal is pretty much accomplished and another, then how do you set your goals and what the next effort's going to be? And what do you know now what your coming agenda is going to be?
We can't say we don't know. In answer to your question, we don't know what the next agenda is going to be, because we really don't know when we are going to be able to say, this disease is no longer on the face of the earth. We don't have to work on it. We don't need money for it. It's done. It's over. Mm-hmm. One of the founding principles of the Carter Center is we do what others don't. So no one was trying to eradicate Guinea worm or Trachoma or any of the others. Nobody was doing anything about it at all, which is why we stepped in. We filled that void. And people ask us all the time, well, why don't you dig wells? Why don't you work on HIV? Why don't you because others are. The simple answer is others are doing it. And they're in that space, so we don't need to be. Mm-hmm. And that has proven successful for us. We're extremely focused. And we're given ideas for branching out all the time. And we stay very focused. And by doing that, we've enjoyed the success we've had.
Except there's the one thing that always is peace. It's always, and I'm afraid it may always be with us until our consciousness is totally changed, or maybe some crisis that we don't even want to imagine has come to. This is a world full of conflict and egos and power-based people, and it's I pray for peace, and believe me, I know how important it is. But when we see the psyche of the world and the history of the world, again, hope is always hopefully alive. But to work on peace, when you see what's going on, and now we're looking at what's going to happen in Venezuela, of course, the Mideast, always, and what's going to be going on, in other places. So when you target your goal for peace, how do you make your list of what you can do, what's important, and where you can go? Or is it just like an ongoing, okay, this month we're going to do Israel, next month we're going to go here? How do you go about making an archetypal plan to try to solve this problem?
People come to us. We don't go to them. So I'm just using this as an example. If the Houthi rebels and the Yemenis said, could you please help in this disaster, this horror that's happening now in Yemen, we could do that. But unless we're asked, we never step in where we're not asked. So that's just how we do it. And if we are asked, then we know there's buy-in from both sides.
But how would you provide security for anyone? I mean, would you want to go to Yemen and talk to? I mean, some of these places without extra super security is really very life-threatening and very dangerous.
And that's true in many parts of the world, not just Yemen. It's true in northern Nigeria with Boko Haram. It's been true in Mali with Boko Haram. And yet we have worked in those countries very successfully. We do not intentionally put our people in harm's way. That said, if it happens, we will do everything possible to get them out safely. We stay in constant communication. So I don't know that we would be sending people into an area in Yemen that was known for bombs dropping every day and violence.
Or kidnapping.
Or any of it.
Or any of that. Have you ever had situations where people felt like they were in harm's way when they went in and something escalated and they found themselves in dangerous situations?
Several years ago, there was an election in the Ivory Coast, and the president of the country lost the election and refused to step down. And 1 million people left the country for fear of a civil war.
Wow. Yeah.
In the process, our staff who had monitored the election and were there doing some wrap-up were caught in the hotel. They were not allowed to leave their hotel. And it took about a month before we were able to negotiate them to get out of there. We do not pay bribes to anyone. Ransom is just not something we do. When I went to Gaza, my passport was held by Hamas officials, and I said, I can't leave without the passport. And they said, well, we're not giving you, you can go in, and when you come out, we'll give you the passport. And I said, no. Well, I had a pretty good idea what they were asking for was really money. And I knew that I couldn't put that on an expense report. So I just said, please give it back to me, and I'll just go back to Israel. You have to walk back and forth. You can't drive or anything. So I said, I'll walk back, and that'll be that. And they realized they just weren't going to get anywhere with me. And so they basically threw the passport at me, and I stayed on my schedule for the rest of the time there. We're very, I want to use the word tight with money, and we are. Only 5% of our budget is on administration, including fundraising.
Wow, that's amazing.
So it is amazing. There are lots of organizations who spend a lot more than 5%.
Yeah.
But people who support us know that 95 cents of every dollar is going to the programs, and only 5 cents is going to
administration. As mentioning to you before we started on the air, it's like you don't buy TV ads. You don't go for the big bucks to try to get your word out. You can't when you're putting 95% of your budget on trying to do your work and only 5% on administration. And I guess the people who you get because of that aren't coming to you to make a lot of money either.
That's correct. No one is there to become wealthy. Rich, yes, because we love what we do, and the fact that we're able to help people is extremely rewarding. Quite frankly, I do not have the capacity to operate on someone with trachoma or to help with mass drug administration. I don't have the capacity to sit with rebels and government leaders and try and bring them to a common ground for peace. But I do have the capacity to help inform people of what we do. And by doing that, if it helps bring some money in so we can continue that work, so much the better.
Now, you've been doing this how many years?
I'm 45 now.
45?
Yes, not with the Carter Center. I've been with the Carter Center just over 9, but I've been in this business since I left graduate school.
So over the 9 years you've been with the Carter Center doing this, what are some of the highlights where you felt finally like we're finally getting somewhere and you get that nice warm feeling that some good has really, really come? Maybe you can review some of the ones that are really highlighted in your own mind that you feel good about.
Well, the day we learned that river blindness was no longer in the Western Hemisphere was a really good day at work, I must say. When we moved from the millions to the hundreds of thousands to down to 28 cases of guinea worm, it makes you feel very good. When you learn that the government in Mali and the rebels, when they've been fighting, have asked the Carter Center to help them make sure that all the issues in the peace accord are being met clearly, that makes us all feel very good. It makes our donors feel good. It makes the staff feel good. Yeah, those are the warm moments.
And the most challenging moments.
I wish you hadn't asked me that. It's when people die. I've made friends all over the world thanks to the Carter Center. They're not donors, they're my friends. And death is inevitable, but I don't like it. And I have flown all over the place just to attend a funeral because those are my friends. I think those are the most challenging, personally, the most challenging times.
When you find yourself in the challenging times, and I have to say, I think these times right we're in are very challenging times. What do you find is your motivation? And I'm sure this probably goes for President Carter as well, because he's had some very challenging times. And what is the credo, the inner motivation that really keeps you on course and going?
That we're doing a good thing, and we're leaving the planet a little bit better than we found it. And that's the motivator.
And it's good to go back on that, I'm sure, from time to time. You have to call upon that. Do you ever feel like some of the people that you're working with could get close to feeling burnt out because of the challenges in this day and age? Do they ever get frustrated to the point where they're going, I just can't see what is the use in going on when we see these things going on in the world?
Well, the easy answer would be, of course. The more honest answer is that a vast majority of our staff have been there 10, 15, 20, 25 years. I've only been there 9 years and a couple of months, and I'm still considered the new kid on the block. So people get frustrated, yes, because government officials don't necessarily keep their word, or rebels don't necessarily follow through with what they said they were going to do, or we discover that guinea worm is now picked up by dogs, and we have to figure out, okay, now you can't tell a dog to drink from a filter. What are we going to do to stop this? And those are disheartening moments. But the goal is still the goal. And I think I can speak for most of the staff. As you said before, we're not there to get rich. We are there to do good in the world.
Mm-hmm. You are a member of Rotary.
I am.
And you're here this week because of Rotary. You've been here before because of Rotary. You traveled around the world because of Rotary. Tell me about the ethics of Rotary and how they align with the Carter Center.
Well, the first one is it the truth? And that has been a key element for President Carter since the first day he decided to run for office of any kind. What he told the American people in 1976, if you vote for me, I will tell you the truth.
Mm.
And so it's interesting to see that we have a president in the White House now who doesn't really care whether it's true or not. But President Carter, it's all about the truth, and it has to be nothing but the truth. And it has served us well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have the respect, I know we have the respect of leadership throughout the world, which is what he wanted to achieve, what President Carter sought to do, because he knows he can't be here forever. And at some point, he and Mrs. Carter will no longer be here. And he wanted to make sure that the Carter Center was just as viable without him as it was with him. And to do that, the staff had to have the credibility. So when we worked in Colombia or Venezuela, or we worked in Ecuador or Niger or Kenya, China, wherever it is we're working, it's the staff that's known on the ground, mm-hmm. wherever it is. And the Carter Center has a corporate culture of hiring the best of the best. And that's it. When I announced that I would be retiring in 2023, I said, I need to find someone to fill my shoes. And I had to find someone who was better than I was at doing it. Not that that was a real challenge, but what I needed was someone who I could hand the ball to and say, it's yours, and feel that there is a very smooth transition.
And
there's Mark. Yes, indeed.
Mark is here.
Mark Williams.
Been very quiet in the corner here.
Well,
and he's been working with you now, and he's got 4 years of being able to actually experience what you're doing as he takes over, and that's a good long time to actually get what he has to do. It must have been an awfully hard decision for you to retire.
I can't say that. I don't know that I will ever fully retire. Mm-hmm. I like staying busy, and my wife says I'm a busy boy, mm-hmm. And I suspect I am. But if I leave the Carter Center, it doesn't mean I'm just pulling a cover up over my head and hiding. I'll just find something else to do, but without having to go into the office every day.
No, that's important to know, especially when you look at all around the world the need and the work to be done. And I guess it's really nice to hear that there is this forward movement that will continue. And as I hear you talk, I can't reflect on the fact that it seems like President Carter has been able to accomplish even more after he was president than when he was president. And does he ever reflect on that how much he's been able to accomplish without the ties of government?
I would have to disagree with you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. Not only did he broker the only peace treaty in the Middle East, he brought our oil consumption down from 8 million barrels a day to 4 million barrels a day. He set aside more land for public use than all of his predecessors combined. More land than is in the state of California. He created 5 national parks. He appointed more women to the federal bench in 4 years than all of his predecessors combined times 7.
Wow.
And the list goes on and on and on. He did amazing things in his 4 years, absolutely extraordinary things. His final budget that he submitted to Congress was a balanced budget. We now have, a $22 trillion deficit? In 1980, he had a balanced budget going to Congress. He told the truth. He had solar panels on the White House roof. He saw the future very clearly.
But somehow a lot of people don't know and remember that about him.
Because he doesn't talk about it. He's written 32 books. None of them are, look how great I am.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. But, you know, he's very, very beloved. And I have to say, I don't think anyone could disagree with the fact that he is so respected and beloved, and obviously by you and the whole team there at the Carter Center, but around the world, that there is this, I think that we're very lucky to have someone like him that will at 94 still be working on this mission, and his beautiful wife still working on really trying to do good in the world. It's a real inspiration.
He inspires all of us as well.
Well, I'm going to finish up Facebook Live here because we've been talking almost an hour. We've got a couple more minutes. But I have to say, I get inspired hearing about what you're doing because I like good news. I don't like bad news. I like to hear about the good being done in the world. And I really have to say I don't feel there's enough good that we hear about in the news, unfortunately. And that's partly why people get depressed. There's a lot to deal with, but unfortunately we don't hear enough about people like Jimmy Carter and you and those out there, the 200 people working behind the scenes, doing good work without getting any kind of recognition or doing it for recognition. So it's just, I just would like to say, it's so nice to know that there are people who care. And again, you mentioned in the beginning of the hour that, actually maybe a half hour ago, about interns. So before we close out, let's remind people how if they want to help, the different ways, everything from donating money to becoming an intern, how can they help?
Absolutely. If someone either is a college junior or senior or graduate student, or someone knows of someone, they can go right to our website, cartercenter.org, and there will be the application form to complete to become an intern with the Carter Center for either 16 weeks during the fall or spring semesters, or 10 weeks during the summer. But because of our affiliation with Emory University, they end up getting 12 college credits for those 16 weeks.
Great.
So it can help them toward their graduation as well.
And if people want to maybe donate money, as you mentioned earlier, or anything from any amount, is that also at the cartercenter.org? Is
Absolutely.
there a place there?
Everything is at cartercenter.org, and whether people decide they want to support it with $5 or $5 million, it will every single dollar is greatly appreciated.
And since this goes out, around the world and people hear it in different places besides here, our wonderful Rotary Club, thank you, Dave Hoffman and others who make this possible. But what if some Rotary Club somewhere, or someone wants to have you come speak? How do they reach out and find you and get you to come to their area and talk?
cartercenter.org. It's pretty consistent.
Yeah.
If we have just a moment.
We have 35 seconds.
Okay, well, then the best story I've got about fundraising is I physically got a Christmas card in the mail with a $5 bill, and it was from an 8-year-old, and she got it for Christmas, and she was sending it to the Carter Center, and she had heard me speak somewhere, and
wow.
If it had been 50 million, it couldn't have made me happier.
A beautiful chicken skin story. I love that. It's been such a treat talking to you. I thank you so much, and a big aloha to you.
And to you, thank you so much.